Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Gotta Pop. My name is Buddy Gott, and on today's show, I want to talk about romantic comedies. And I have a guest with me who knows an awful lot about romantic comedies. He has written over 20 romantic comedy novels, with the latest one just coming out very recently. We'll talk about that. Anyway, my guest is Rich Amooi. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. And I did mention that you recently released a book, and I want to congratulate you on this because if I am correct, this is your 22nd rom-com book. Isn't that right? Am I correct?
It is correct. Yeah, it's Royal Crush, and it just came out a few days ago, and now I'm already working on the next one, trying to get it going. It's I don't have everything planned out in advance. Like I can just jump in. Like the first part of the book, when I start writing them, it sometimes takes me a while until I get into the flow. So I'm
Mhm.
just getting into it now.
Oh, that's exciting. And this is a little different for you, isn't it? Because you had is this a series? Isn't it the first of a series?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I have 21 standalones, not connected to any other stories, and then some people were saying, maybe you should pivot and try something different. And I actually thought of some other things, like maybe writing a cozy mystery or
Oh.
something else, but I decided to try a series, still romantic comedy, but. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I do like standalones though. I like stories that just kind of end and then we get the next book is a brand new set of characters you've never met before in your entire life. Those are my favorites. So I'll go back to that after I'm done with this.
Well, that's fun, and I agree with you. I certainly I read an awful lot of mysteries, and of course, a lot of famous mysteries are parts of series. But there is, and while that's wonderful, there is something really nice about reading one thing and you get totally into it, and then well, that's it. And what's nice too is I know, like even my wife Lisa and myself, sometimes we are kind of deterred from reading a book in a series because sometimes that you almost feel like the sense of obligation where you have to read every book in the series. And like there was some author we both wanted to read recently, and I think there is close to 30 books in the series, and I'm like, oh boy, that's a big commitment of my time.
Yeah, I wonder if that's Janet Ivanovich because she has those mysteries that have done very, very well.
Yeah.
And some people in my family have read it. My nephew and my niece, they're big fans. But yeah, you look at sometimes you see there are like 25 or 30 books in this series, and if you just discovered them for the first time, you're like, what?
Exactly. Exactly. And
Oh,
and
sorry.
you're right. She wasn't the one I was thinking of, but you're right because I bought the first book of that. I guess is Stephanie Plum is that series, and the first one is
Yes, that's
one
it.
for the money, and then I think it's I don't know if the next one's two for the show, but now I think it's like 63 for the. All right, maybe there's not 63, but there's an awful lot of books in that series, and I'll get to them sooner or later. But yeah, standalones are great, and I want to just before we start talking about romantic comedy movies, I do want to mention some of the books that you have because I've read several of your books. And folks, if you love rom-coms, you've got to check out Rich's books. He's got they're just charming, fun romance stories, and I'm not going to name all of them because that would take up half the show there. But just some of your titles. You Chive Me Crazy was one of your recent books that came out. I think it was last spring, wasn't it? Sometime in
I, I
2023.
get I get the dates and characters mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that was last year.
I don't know how you couldn't get them mixed up because you've written so much in a relatively short amount of time.
It's
But that
I ask my wife sometimes because we're talking about something, and I say, "Hey, who was the character in my third book, the Kissing Frogs? So, what was the name of the dog in Kissing Frogs?" You say, "Oh, that was Keely, short for Kilimanjaro." And I said, "Oh, that's right." So she remembers them all, but I can't remember them all.
yeah, I would struggle with that myself. But that one's I'll tell you, I don't want to be too long on this, but because I know we have other things to get to. But that was such a fun book, and what I liked about that too is that book has stuck with me because it involves the one of the main characters, the lead female character in it. She has a food truck, and it's called Potato Heaven. And
Yeah.
I'll be around food trucks sometimes in my city, and it's almost like I'm looking for potato heaven because it was just so memorable in there. And some of the other books you have, Liliana Jones and the Temple of Groom, uh, and Eclair to Remember, Madame Love, actually, Coffee, Tea, or Me. Just another silly love song. Being a big fan of Paul McCartney, I love that that's the title of one of your books. And like I said, there's over 20, and folks, go check them out. They're really, really good.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And let's get talking about rom-coms then. I've always been a fan of romantic comedy movies, and gosh, going back as far as I remember, I know when I was a kid, I'd watch movies on, well, what back then was known as UHF, and you'd see older movies from like the '60s starring like Rock Hudson, Doris Day, and that was probably my first exposure as a little kid to some of those things. And then got going back to black and white too with some Cary Grant movies, Jimmy Stewart movies. Have you been has it been like that for you too, where you've been a fan of rom-coms for a good part of your life?
Well, some of those older rom-coms, like you're talking about with Doris Day and Rock Hudson and stuff like that, I discovered those later in life after I got into rom-coms. My first kind of obsession with rom-coms started in the 80s.
Oh, okay, a lot of good ones back then.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's when Harry Met Sally. That whole era back then was when I really started getting into it and started appreciating them. And it was later on after that that I started discovering some of the old classics from the 40s and 50s and 60s and stuff like that. But I've always been a big fan of more of the modern day romantic comedy.
Yeah, me too.
But
I
yeah,
think.
it started back in the 80s with John Cusack, Say Anything,
Oh, that was a great one.
and When Harry Met Sally. Then there's Pretty Woman, and so many others in that era that they just hooked me. Like I was there, I was the first person in the theater to see them when they came out. I went, on a if they came out on a Friday, I was there at a 10 a.m. show on a Friday, and there were like 6 people in the theater, and I was one of them because nobody went to the movies on a Friday morning at 10.
Yeah,
Uh,
I used to do the same thing.
yeah, so that was my thing. I wanted to see the first showing when they came out.
Yeah, that's how I used to be back then too. And well, especially like in the '80s. Well, in the '80s, that's when I like started having girlfriends and everything when I was in high school, and even into my 20s. These rom-coms were great date movies, of course, and then they are for obviously for married people as well. But gosh, I saw so many of those back then. I remember going to the theater a couple times to see the Pretty Woman, actually, with well, a couple different girls back then. But you mentioned When Harry Met Sally, and I think that was a turning point in a lot of ways for rom-coms in terms of, that one. While it was definitely a comedy, it had some serious moments in it too, and no one could call that. I think sometimes, and I'm sure you've heard people say this, and is that some people, I think, especially back prior to the '80s, kind of viewed rom-coms as being fluff, and that's always. I've always thought that was unfair. I think anything that gives people enjoyment, whether it's films or books, if it's making somebody feel good, it's not fluff. It's doing its job. It's entertaining. But yeah, you had that was an unusual one in some ways because you had well, obviously Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan. Billy Crystal, I guess some people wouldn't consider him to be your traditional leading man type. I mean, he's a handsome man, but not like a big striking like a some of the others from that time period. But I think that's one thing that appealed to it. Here was this, fairly average guy who is having this great romance, and I think that kind of it connects with people. I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was one of the biggest movies where people discovered the banter between going back and forth between the characters, and that kind of just grew over time, especially after that movie where you looked forward to the characters and what they were going to say next,
Yes.
when they're getting in trouble and something happens, and then they go back and forth and they're butting heads, and that's one of the fun parts of romantic comedies.
Yeah, it is. It is, especially when there's some headbutting there, because just like in real life, things don't always go perfectly. You're gonna have, some moments where you're not always 100% in agreement with things, or you have just different ways of looking at life and living your lives, and that makes for more interesting stories, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's part of, and that's part of the fun of
Yeah.
the rom-coms is that's my favorite part is the dialogue.
Oh, I agree.
I do like the situational comedy, different things happening, and that's one of the things I like to do in my books is to, when a character is something's happening to a character and I can say, what's the worst thing that can happen to this person right now? And then I make it happen. So I like that in movies as well, where this person has a fear of something and then, hey, let's give it to them.
Yeah, I like that too. I like
Mhm.
that a lot. And like you said, the dialogue is so important because
Mhm.
it can't always be, just, I love you. Well, I love you more. And well, that's wonderful. It's great to have, some back and forth. That's why I think some of the old movies from and granted, I don't have a great big history where I know all of them, but some of the screwball comedies, even from like the 30s and 40s, still stand up for so many people is because you had such great dialogue, such back and forth between a lot of the characters. I think you can put on an old Cary Grant movie and really see that. There were some great ones back then, and like you, I love the things from the '80s. Boy, I've got a whole list of movies here that from the some going back to the '80s. I wanted to ask you about this one though. When I asked this question on Facebook and X. I asked people what their favorite rom-coms were. One that came up over and over again was Notting Hill. Are you a fan of Notting Hill, Rich?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite.
I thought it
Yeah.
was. I thought you had mentioned that one before.
Yeah, I've seen it. I think we've watched it at least 6 times.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, it's a very cool movie because you have the characters are so different. You have the big movie star Julia Roberts, and then you have Hugh Grant, who's kind of a sometimes clueless guy, down to earth, just
Yeah.
doing whatever. And then it's the clash of the opposites.
Yes, it
And
is.
and that's exactly what it is. And then you have some side characters with a lot of personality who bring the humor. And it's just I don't know what it is about that movie. I mean, I guess you a lot of movies you like to see somebody end up with somebody that you don't expect them to be with, and
Yes.
it's almost like good for them.
Yeah.
They deserve it. That's so you're kind of rooting for him, but then you also feel bad when certain things happen in the movie. But yeah, that movie, I don't know what it is about it that connected with me, but that was a really good overall movie. Definitely one of my top favorites for sure.
Yeah, it's a great one. I had just watched it for the first time in a very long time. I remember seeing that in the theaters when it came out. I was probably there opening weekend for it, and maybe saw it one or two times since then. But my wife Lisa and I were recently just looking for something to watch one night, and it was on one of the 50,000 pay services that we have on our cable and streaming platforms. And she said she had never seen it. I'm like, oh, okay, forget everything else. We're gonna watch Notting Hill, and she loved it. And yeah, it's a very charming movie. And yes, you find yourself rooting for these very different characters and feeling bad for them when things don't work out. Here's Julia Roberts' character, who you would think has everything in the world because she's a big movie star, everyone adores her, but that doesn't mean her life is perfect. It doesn't mean that she is. Well, there's a famous quote from that one that's at the end. What is it? You probably know better than I do. I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy. Was it looking
Asking
for
him to
asking
love.
for? Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's so touching because here she is. She couldn't be much more successful in her field, but she's still just a person looking for love, and it's really charming. It's touching.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, definitely one of my favorites from over the years for sure.
Now, do you have an all-time favorite, or is that an impossible question to ask you?
Mm. Oh, that's a tough. Okay, I'll tell you one of my one of my favorites over the last, probably at the top of the list from the last 10 years, is The Proposal with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock.
Oh, okay. I've never seen that one.
Oh,
Well, it sounds like I need to get on that.
yeah, that's probably, I'm guessing, in the last 10 years, that's number one.
I'll have to check that
Um,
out.
it has a lot to it, and it's almost like enemies to lovers. She's the boss, and he, you know, it bends over backwards for her at every moment. And there's just something about that movie. It's just so much fun, and Betty White is in it,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
yeah. It's the humor is so good in that movie, especially all the deadpans from Ryan Reynolds. Like he has one where when they arrive to Alaska, Sandra Bullock, who's like so spoiled and has high heels that are a foot tall and stuff like that, and she's coming down, she's descending a ladder to get into their boat, and it's taking her forever. And he's just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, she comes down to the boat, and he says, and you may not think this is funny, but I think it's pretty funny. He says, "Congratulations, I'm 100 years old." Uh, just his deadpan when he says it, and there were so many lines like that where he was just he deadpan said something. It was just hilarious because they were so opposite. Um,
I can hear him saying that. He has a great delivery.
oh,
I'm a big fan of him.
yeah, he's amazing. He's probably also near the top of my list for like leading guys who I would want to see in a movie. He's just so entertaining.
He is, and I think that's why he's done so well. Kind of going back and forth between your regular traditional comedies, rom-coms, and even action movies. There's just something about the guy. Well, yeah, he's very, very talented and very, very appealing as an actor. And yeah, I'd never seen that one. You mentioned Sandra Bullock as the lead in that, right? I'm trying to remember a movie she was in. You probably know it. There was one she did with Hugh Grant where I think she worked for him. He was some very mega rich
Yeah,
person.
that's 2 weeks notice.
Yes, yes. I remember liking that and even seeing it multiple times when it was new, which was probably about 20 years ago, I would think at this point. Maybe a little more than that. But that was a pretty good one as well.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good one. Hugh Grant's been in a whole bunch of them, of course.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was trying to think of another one with Sandra Bullock. While you were sleeping,
Oh, that's a great one.
that's also one of those movies that's like near the top of my list. It was really, really good.
It was very, very good. And was it Jeff Daniels? Was it? No, not Bill Pullman. Bill Pullman was in
Yeah.
it with it, right? Yeah. I get those guys mixed up sometimes.
So do I? Yeah, I always get characters mixed up, but yeah. So that one was another one. One of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And in terms of recent ones, I saw one recently. I had never heard of it. Lisa and I watched it. It was just checking my list here. It's from 2018. Did you ever hear of Wedding Destination with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder?
Yeah, I did. I did see that one.
Yeah, it's unique. It's really quirky, and it would definitely not be for everyone. There is some like even some crude stuff in there, and there's a sex scene that's a little I don't know, a little wild, a little graphic. It's mostly comedic, but not for everyone. But there's another movie that it has very good dialogue in it. I think.
That one has, from what I remember, that one had a lot of dialogue. That was
Yeah.
all talking, that whole movie, pretty much.
It was, and what was really unique about that one that I found interesting, and it wasn't even until halfway into the movie that I realized this was going on, is you see other characters in the background in scenes. Like there's one point where it's called Wedding Destination. This isn't a big spoiler. They attend a wedding. You'll see people there, but they never actually have any conversations with anyone else other than themselves in the movie. So it's just mostly it's all the dialogue between these two characters. You might hear a voice off screen, but there's not an actual conversation. It's very unique. And these characters they're not always the most likable people in the world. They've got some quirks to them, but we watched it. I really liked it a lot. I would watch that one again. That was, like I said, that was from 2018. Like that in terms of a recent movie, a fairly recent movie. And what do you think of the? Well, this is probably at least 10 years old now. But what do you think of Bridesmaids? Do you like Bridesmaids?
Yeah, we both liked it a lot. I mean, it's funny because I used to watch some of those comedies like back in I guess it was the 70s and 80s, and some of them had some pretty gross scenes in them.
Yeah.
Um, so the Bridesmaids had the one where everybody was throwing up, and
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
for some people who like who just want the romance and stuff, that might be a little over the top for them.
hmm
But oh, man, I laughed so hard at that. It's so funny. It just kept going and going and going. Just you know what it reminded me of? It kind of reminded me of the old comedies, the Naked Gun comedies, and
Oh yeah.
Leslie Nielsen and of what was that, the 70s or the 80s? I can't
I
remember.
think it was early. I think they started early '80s, and maybe
Oh,
yeah, him and Priscilla Presley, and
yeah. I mean, that was like those were my movies back then, were like the Naked Gun and airplane type movies. Oh, I loved
oh,
those.
I love the first Airplane, and the second Airplane was pretty good too.
Yeah, there's something. And so I've always been and there are some people who are more straight line. They just want the romance and some comedy, some humor, but I'm okay with over the top situations. And, some of my books have a few here and there, like in Liliana Jones in the Temple of Groom, when she runs there was no toilet paper in the bathroom,
Oh
and
yeah,
she's waddling with
I
her
remember
underwear
that.
down,
Yes, I like that book a lot.
and she covers herself up with a newspaper, and the Pope is on the front of it, and she's in Italy and everybody's all going crazy. So I like over the top, but I don't do it all the time. It just has to be the right situation. And those movies back then had a lot of it. And
Yes.
that's what Bridesmaids kind of reminds me of a little bit. They had some over the top, like the puking scene was a little
Yeah.
over the top.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. And it's funny that this you saying all that made me think of Adam Sandler, because Adam Sandler is one that I think a lot of people are either they like him a lot or they refuse to watch his movies because there is, often some like over the top or crude humor in some of his movies. But he's put out some good, charming movies as well. Like you had The Wedding Singer with him and Drew Barrymore, which was really cute. And I liked 50 First Dates a lot. One of my friends had mentioned that when I asked what their favorite rom-coms were, and that's something I knew that my parents both actually enjoyed a lot, which surprised me at the time because I remember my dad saying, "Oh, we're going to watch this Adam Sandler movie," and I'm like, "Oh, Dad, you're not going to like Adam Sandler. I know your sense of humor. You are not me. You're probably not going to like Adam Sandler." But he just thought it was the most charming movie. They watched it over and over again.
Oh yeah. And those are both great ones. Yeah, Wedding Singer, I've seen that more than a few times. And even 50 First Dates. We've seen that a couple of times too. And that one, I mean, there's nothing really over the top in that one. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
that's not so bad.
a cute little movie.
Yeah. And another one that you talk about things with over the top. I had this on my list as one of my favorites. It's a quirky movie. It's not one of the most popular movies in the world. I think it wasn't even released here in the States when it came out. But we mentioned Four Weddings and a Funeral, and that was directed or written by Richard Curtis, who has done multiple things. He also did Love Actually. But one of the first things he wrote was a movie called The Tall Guy with
Mhm.
Jeff Goldblum and Emma Thompson. Have you ever seen that?
Actually, that one I don't recall.
It came out in 1989, and if you like quirky, this is one to check out. I recommend this to everyone, assuming you are willing to maybe put up with like a couple of things that are not necessarily in every standard or most standard romantic comedies. It tells the story of Jeff Goldblum is an American actor who lives and works in England, and he is struggling in his career and in romance. He's having horrible luck with both. As an actor, he works as a stooge for this very eccentric character played by Rowan Atkinson, who plays, of course, Mr. Bean, and he's been in multiple things over the years. And then Goldblum's character meets this nurse played by Emma Thompson. It was one of her early roles before she became a household name, and they fall for each other. And he's it's called the tall guy because he is like the tall guy stooge normally as an actor. They say, "Get me the tall guy." Especially compared to Rowan Atkinson, but he gets a job in this musical version of The Elephant Man called
Mhm.
Elephant with an exclamation mark. And the songs that are in this musical for Elephant are hilarious. And the romance between him and Emma Thompson, it's something that you would think that these characters would not connect, but there is this connection there. And it's very quirky. There's this really wild, little raunchy romance slash sex scene between the two. But if you wanted something a little outside of the norm, I recommend The Tall Guy to you and to others as well. It's a fun, quirky romantic comedy. I like it a
Oh,
lot.
I'll check it out.
You should. You should. Any others? Any favorites that we haven't mentioned yet, Rich?
Um, let's see. Oh, you know what? One that I really, really liked, and I'm not into politics at all, but An American President.
Oh, that's a great
Uh,
one.
that was like a really, really good one. And that's kind of a borderline romantic comedy because it is, but there's not a lot of humor in it. It's very subtle a lot of times
Right.
because you have the president who lost his wife and now that's trying to get back there into the dating world and stuff, and he's a little bit awkward doing it. And then you have who is it? Annette Bening,
Yeah,
who's
Annette Bening.
more outgoing, and their little meet cute on the telephone was like one of the best ever. Um,
Yes, yes.
so that was a really, really good one. Seen that one a few times.
Yeah, I haven't seen that in many years, but that was a good one. You look at through my notes. One of my friends had mentioned that as one of his favorites too. A friend of mine named Nick Everett had mentioned that. And was Rob Reiner in that too as a supporting role? Maybe I'm thinking of someone else.
Oh no, that was that uh
I got that wrong. You're right. It's not Rob Reiner. I'm thinking maybe of him being in Sleepless or When Harry Met Sally.
oh okay, yeah, no, I can't remember who, an American president, if that was
Yeah.
Robert Duvall or who the no, no, I can see his face, but I can't remember the name on that
That's
one.
okay. That's okay. But yeah, that's a good one. And I remember too that that was written, if I'm right, by Aaron Sorkin, who went on to do the West Wing TV show. And I remember he's just so good with his dialogue. He's an exceptional writer.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's really good. But when it comes to rom-coms and stuff, like back in the beginning, I mean, I watched anything that Julia Roberts was in,
Oh yeah,
and I started, the first one I saw with her, and it wasn't even a huge hit, was called Mystic Pizza,
oh yeah, that was a good movie. I
and I
like
saw
Mystic
her, and
Pizza.
I was like, I kind of like her, and then a lot of things came out, The Runaway Bride, and um, My Best Friend's
My best
Wedding.
friend's wedding. Yeah, that she was great
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, so I've always been a big fan of Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant and Sandra Bullock, and trying to think of some other ones. I can't. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Yeah. Well, I've got a list here. I'm going to ask you about some of these that some of my friends had shared when I asked them about it online. One that I like a lot, and Lisa and I watch this every year, it's a Christmas movie called The Holiday with
Mhm.
Cameron Diaz, Kate Winslet. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, we've seen it a couple of times. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a
yeah,
lot.
that's it. That one's a cool one because you get like a double romance out of it.
Yeah.
And although my wife Sylvie still says, yeah, I mean, they could have picked somebody else instead of Jack Black. Why
Yeah.
did they? Um, but but yeah, that was. I mean, no, but that was a great movie for
Yeah, like you
sure.
said, you get, two romantic stories there, which is kind of nice. How about, one thing that's if always been popular. Well, it's starting to regain popularity now, but you go back several decades. Musicals. used to be like one of the biggest things, for audiences in movie theaters. And so many of those actually fall, I think, under the romantic comedy umbrella. But one of them, a more recent popular musical, was Mamma Mia. Mamma
Mhm.
Mia 1 and 2. How'd you feel about those?
I saw, I don't know if I saw the second one. I saw the first one. We liked it. I'm actually really not that much into musicals. But we saw that and I thought it was good. It was entertaining. I don't think I saw the second one though.
Second one was pretty good. I was not sure I was going to like the first one. While I like a pretty good amount of ABBA songs, I didn't know. I was like, oh boy, can they really stretch that into, a musical? But the first one was entertaining. The second one was pretty good too. And I like a lot of the cast too, like Pierce Brosnan in a supporting role. I've always been a fan of his, and I liked that quite a bit. Another one we mentioned, I'll just go through this list. Sleepless in Seattle. I don't did we talk about well, there's of course Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan had done a couple movies together, that and then
Yeah, I mean, You've Got Mail is definitely up there on my list. I've seen it so many times.
I actually prefer that over Sleepless in Seattle, to be honest with you. I think I've seen it more anyway. I'm not saying Sleepless in Seattle's bad.
No, not at all. The Sleepless in Seattle is a great movie, but I and I'm sure this would be a good argument for some people, but I don't really consider that a rom-com
Hmm.
because there's not a lot of humor in that movie at all. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's true.
there's hardly any humor, but
Yeah,
they call Sleepless in Seattle a romantic comedy.
yeah,
But where's the comedy?
yeah. That's a really good point.
And I'm not knocking the movie in general because it was a great movie, but it was one of those weird things where, they label it as romantic comedy and there really isn't any comedy. And then the characters don't meet for the longest
Yeah,
time. Still, that being said, that is a really, really good movie.
it is. I agree.
Very, very popular. Um, but going back to You've Got Mail, I've seen that, I don't know how many times, 5 or 6 times. And
I think I
uh,
have too.
that's definitely higher up on my list of one of my favorites.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, Sleepless in Seattle, fantastic movie, but really they don't share the screen together till almost the very end of the movie, which, fine. It was still a very compelling story up until that point, but I think that was almost part of the fun of You've Got Me. I was like, oh, we get to see these two very talented actors that we like so much actually, interacting more in this. And
Yeah,
it was a good movie.
and my wife is yelling at the screen in Sleepless in Seattle, "Kiss! You're right there. This is the climax. Kiss!" He wants that kiss, or it's not a done deal.
I'm with her. Yeah, Kiss. Some other. Oh, you know what? Another one we haven't. I don't think we've mentioned this. Several of my friends mentioned this as a favorite, and while I like it, I can't say it's one of my all-time favorites. Is Moonstruck?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a good movie. I haven't seen it in at least 20 years, so that's why
Oh,
it's
it's
not
been a long
first and
time
foremost in my
since
head.
I've seen it, but yeah, that was a really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm trying to think of some other ones that were, some ones that were really popular, like Sweet Home Alabama. That was a really
Oh
popular one.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Reese Witherspoon's done pretty well with romantic
yeah,
comedies and other movies.
she's just the cutest thing. She's always fun to watch in movies.
She is.
Um, what's the one she does with the where she's the lawyer?
Oh, Legally Blonde.
Yeah, so I mean, stuff
Yeah,
like that. She's just so cute to watch.
she
Um,
is.
and then another one that was really popular, Bridget Jones's Diary.
Oh
That
yeah, with Renee
was
Zellweger and
popular.
now was Hugh Grant in that as well? No, I'm trying to think who the love interests were in that. I know you had I can't remember.
Oh, who was that?
There was someone she was obsessed with.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh boy. I know people are
I haven't
watching this
seen
right
it in a
now and
while, so
yelling at the screen.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody who's gonna watch this video is gonna say, "You idiot! It's this person."
But Colin
But
Firth is one of them. He's
oh,
in
Colin
it,
Firth.
and yeah, and I can't remember who else. But yeah, yell at us and leave comments here later on, folks. But we mentioned that director Richard Curtis, who we said had done Four Weddings and a Funeral, and then The Tall Guy, and Love Actually. Love Actually is one of my favorites. Another one too that is, it falls under a Christmas movie
Yeah,
umbrella.
we've seen that one many, many times and very enjoyed it a lot. Have you seen About Time?
I may have refresh my memory on that
Oh,
one.
that's with Rachel McAdams and
Yes.
the guy, I can't remember his name, but uh,
He's been showing up in more and more lately. I forget his name too.
yeah, I can't remember the guy, but that was a really good one, About Time.
Yeah, I liked that quite a bit. I like Rachel McAdams. She's a good actress. And she was in, well,
Oh
not a
yeah.
rom-com, but she was in The Notebook, which is a great romantic
Oh yeah, I think
story.
that was probably the first time I saw her,
I think
and
so for me too.
yeah, she's definitely one of my favorites as well to see in movies. I was trying to think of the other one. Oh, with John Cusack, Serendipity. Have you seen that?
Oh, yes. That's a great movie.
Yeah,
Fantastic. I didn't see that till about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I can't remember when it came out, but I was a little late getting to it. But that's a wonderful movie.
yeah, that was a
Cusack's
good.
good. Cusack, he's one that does all kinds of movies too. You know, he'll do some quirky ones. And you mentioned going back to the '80s. He had Say Anything, which was a great movie, and you know that's so iconic with him holding up the boombox while he's playing the Peter Gabriel song, and
Yeah.
that's a great one. Yeah, but Serendipity was really good. I like that a lot. And some more. Uh, Someone had mentioned Annie Hall from the '70s as being one of their favorites, and I didn't really, I really wouldn't have classified it that immediately as being a romantic comedy, but I suppose it is much different than a lot of the ones we're mentioning today.
Yeah, I think I saw that, but I guess it didn't leave a very good impression because I don't really remember what it's about. I guess it's about a person named Annie Hall, but but
Yeah,
I
she's in
don't.
there.
I know that's a Woody Allen movie, but
Yeah.
I don't remember much about it, so I don't think it left a very good impression on me. But it was very popular.
Yeah, very popular. Another one that I like a lot is Something's Gotta Give with Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton. That was a
Yeah.
pretty good movie. That was one that I think for whatever reason I wasn't expecting a whole lot from it, but ended up liking it quite a bit.
Yeah, well, that was wait, it was something got it because I know I've seen it, but you know what? I'm mixing that up with the one I think is that the one with Greg Kinnear, or is that a different one?
No, that's oh gosh, what is that? As That's As Good as It Gets, which
Oh,
came
okay,
out not too
right.
long before the
Right.
other
I
one.
think isn't he an author or something?
Yeah,
And
he's an author, and
he's
then
Mr. Grumpy Pants, and
yeah, Greg Kinnear is his neighbor,
yeah.
and the love interest in that is Helen Hunt. Which,
Oh, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in a long time. I remember that was a big Academy Award winner at the time, and I remember watching it multiple times on cable. But it's one that I liked back then, but I have never gone out of my way to rewatch. Great movie though. Great
Mhm.
movie. But yeah, Something's Got to Give. I remember Jack Nicholson's character. I think he was probably grumpy again. Nicholson does that a lot. But he was dating Diane Keaton's character's daughter, who I think was Amanda Peet. And then well, obviously there was a big, big age difference there. But then he ended up getting involved with her mother, played by Diane Keaton. And Keanu Reeves was in that too, as he played a doctor in that. It was a kind of a different role for him, but it was another cute movie. It's one that I need to rewatch soon. And we mentioned Meg Ryan earlier. I know she's been in, you know, certainly quite a few great romantic comedies and other things. And one here that I had forgotten about, one of my friends mentioned as a favorite was French Kiss with
Oh,
her
yeah.
and Kevin Kline. And I
Yeah,
remember
that's
liking that. Yeah, that's a good one as well. And this is an older one here, but The Goodbye Girl from the '70s. Did you ever see that with Richard Dreyfuss, Marsha Mason? It was a Neil.
I think I saw it, but it was so long ago, I really don't remember much about it.
Yeah, it's another one too that you know I kind of forgot about. Good enough movie for sure. But yeah, there's just gosh, so many over the years, and then there's some more recent ones. Like what do I got here? Clueless was a cute movie, I think, from the '90s. Did you ever see that with Alicia Silverstone? It was a good, more
Oh
modern
yeah.
rom com.
Yeah, that's what I don't I think I only saw it the one time. That was in the 90s?
I believe it was. Yeah, I think I want to say like mid or late 90s now. So that's, making me feel old because it doesn't seem like that long ago, where it's something that's probably close to 30 years old now. But that was a good movie.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's amazing. And there are probably a whole bunch of other movies from the 90s and the early 2000s that I can't even remember at the moment that were just really good, solid movies.
Yeah, and you mentioned, and there's just some actors and actresses too that seem to, blend so well with romantic comedy movies, like a Julia Roberts, a Meg Ryan. You mentioned Reese Witherspoon. I remember, and some of them too can take what maybe on paper doesn't look like the most appealing story, but they turn them into something really watchable. And I remember there was one with Reese Witherspoon, and I'm gonna get the title wrong on it, but I want to say it was Almost Heaven or something, where I think something happened to her character where she might have been in a comatose state, and then she falls in love with this guy, and it was played by Mark Ruffalo. And gosh, I wish I could remember the name of that, but she was in it, that made it so much better. And it was good. It ended up being enjoyable. But yeah, there's so many just great movies. And speaking of rom-com movies, one thing that's been very, very popular over the past several years are like the Hallmark Christmas movies. Do you find yourself watching those sorts of things?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely every year we start watching them and um that's been kind of a tradition for more than a few years now. Although some of them are starting to run together now with the same storyline. The guy, going back to the small town, and somebody's up for a promotion, and
Yeah.
and they have to decide between going to get that promotion or staying in the small town. Um, that's a pretty common one that we've seen like 100 times. But yeah, we've seen some good ones over the years for sure.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the stories do get a little repetitious with those at times, but a lot of times, I think with most romantic comedies and really with any kind of movie, you kind of, to a degree, know what you're going to get at the end. Like if if you're reading or watching a murder mystery, you know that it's going to get solved at the end. If you're watching, a romantic comedy, more often than not, there's going to be, two people falling in love at some point. I know people
This
get really
is
mad
pretty
when that doesn't
funny.
happen. I'm sorry, what
Yeah,
was that?
yeah, yeah. No, it's funny because sometimes I'll see a review for one of my books and somebody will say something like, "This was so predictable. You knew they were going to get together in the end." Of course,
Wow, shocker.
it's a romance.
Exactly,
What am I going
exactly.
to do? Kill them both off? It's it's so funny when I read stuff like that. Yes, of course. I don't care what happens. I'm going to throw everything at them. I'm going to make their lives very, very difficult where they want to give up 10 different times, but in the end, they're going to achieve love and they're going to be together. I'm just
Yeah.
going I'm just going to make it very difficult for them to get there.
And
Um,
you're really good at that too. I'm not trying to blow smoke up, parts of you or anything, but you are. You really throw some stuff at them. Where I remember reading one of them recently. It might have even been You Drive Me Crazy. I'm like, they are going to get together, right? Rich isn't going to throw some like weird curveball at me here, and it's well, that's part of the fun
yeah.
of rom coms and other kinds of stories.
Yeah. I
You have
mean,
something
that's
you're
what
rooting for, and you want to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean that's the reason why people read and watch romances is because they know they're guaranteed a happy ending. So that, is that predictable? Absolutely. But the path to getting there is could be different,
Yeah.
and the obstacles that they encounter along the way, that's going to be, different depending on the book or the movie. But yeah, in the end, they're going to be together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not a romance.
Exactly. And, we talked about the Hallmark movies a little while ago. And unfortunately, I think they sometimes get a bad rap from people, saying, oh, well, they're so predictable. And you're absolutely right. You're going to see like the same kind of version, usually like more often than not, it's a woman from the big city who goes to the small town, meets like the, blue collar guy. But But so what? I mean, there's a reason that Hallmark makes, I want to say, in excess of 2 dozen movies every holiday season because they know that there's an audience for that and people want that stuff. And sometimes through, that season, Lisa and I will be sitting there looking for something to watch, and we're like, well, let's just put that on. We know we're going to feel good. We're going to escape into this for a couple of hours, whether and you find this same thing with books. It's this escape where you go into this nice other world and you get attached to these characters. You find yourself rooting for them, even though you know how it's probably going to end up. You root for them, and there's a sweetness and charm.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the reason why they have a lot of viewers that return and keep watching them, or people that are reading romances or romantic comedies like mine, is because they know in the end, they know what they're going to get. They're going to get a happy ending. And that's what these people want. They want, for a lot of people, these movies and the books are just escapes from the real world. There's enough drama in the world that they just want to escape to, and they know it's going to end in a happy way.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like I said, I've read several of your books, and they're just so enjoyable. And I could seriously, I could see like so many of them being turned into movies at some point, and I hope that happens for you. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that happens for you at some point because you can tell a really good story. I've just
Thank you.
enjoyed the heck out of some of them. No, I can't remember if I mentioned. Oh yeah, I did mention it, but Madam Love Actually was another one that I really liked a lot. And I love your titles. You have such great titles. And folks, if you don't know Rich's books, really go read them, but go look at the covers of his books. The artwork that you have on your covers, I've always loved that since you started publishing. You've got some great covers.
Yeah, that's my artist. It's Sue Trainer. She's in the UK, and I discovered her well, a long time ago. That was it was probably a year before I published my first book. I saw some cover that caught my attention on Amazon, and I said, "Oh, I like this cover. It's cute." And I was thinking of doing the illustrated covers, so I looked inside the book and saw her name in there, and I
Ah,
said, and look, found her online, and then that's how it all started. I contacted her, and she's done almost all my covers. I think out of 22 romantic comedies, I think she's done 19 of them.
oh wow,
Out
that's
of 20.
awesome. Well, she does
Yeah,
great work, very very great work.
yeah, yeah.
They they fit your stories very well.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Sue's great.
Yeah, and again, I congratulate you on the recent release of your book, Royal Crush. I'm looking forward to reading that. I was blown away when I saw that. I'm like, wow, this is 22nd book. That's just fantastic. I mean, you've been,
It's crazy. I don't even
yeah.
know. I don't know how I did it really. I mean, this was when I started, it was just kind of this was back in 2010, I guess, when I was just thinking, I had thoughts of trying to break into Hollywood and writing a movie script. And my wife was like, why don't you write a book and then let somebody else make the movie? And I was like, it's a pretty good idea. And she was taking a class at Stanford at the time and said, why don't you take a creative writing class? So I ended up taking four. And that's how it all started from there. Like a year later, I published my first book.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
it's been
So
fun for, I'm sorry,
it's
go
all
ahead,
thanks
Rich.
to my wife. I mean, she's the reason why I'm a published author.
That's wonderful. And folks, another thing I suggest doing too is following Rich on social media. I know you're on Facebook, Instagram. I don't know where else you might be. There's so many different platforms now. But one thing that I've enjoyed over the years, we've probably been connected for, I would say, close to 10 years now. Where I feel like you and your wife are old friends. I've loved seeing your story together. I'll tell you, folks, if you want to see a nice romantic couple, check out Rich and his wonderful wife Sylvie. I love the things you post together, and I can tell you guys are, without sounding too corny here, you can tell you're so much in love. You kind of remind me a lot of me and my wife Lisa. Lisa and I say that sometimes. We were like, if we lived together, we'd probably all hang out. You guys are so much fun and just really so sweet and charming.
Thank you. Yeah, I scored big time.
She's wonderful, and I know she's written some books as well.
Yeah,
Sylvie Martin that's your
yeah,
wife's last name, right? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. She's
Yep.
great.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, that's she's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, Well, she's lucky too, because you're a good guy, Rich Amooi.
Hey,
You're welcome. And folks, I thank you so much for listening to the show or watching the show, whichever way you're doing it. And really, I encourage you again to check out Rich's books. They're available online. I think your books are, I know they're on Kindle Unlimited as well, aren't they, Rich? Or
yeah,
well, some, most of them are anyway.
yeah, you can, so you can find them all on Amazon.
Yeah, yeah, and just really they're great reads. So fun and so sweet and funny. And Rich, thank you so much for being on the show today. I've had a blast talking with you. I know that once we sign off, I'm going to be, oh, we should have mentioned that one, or we should have mentioned that one. There's just so many great movies out there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure I'll think of like at least another 5 or 6 that, oh, we didn't even talk about that one.
Well, we could always do a sequel, Rich. We could do a sequel
Yes, we
episode.
will. We'll make it a week. We're going to make it a weekly
Oh,
feature.
okay, yeah, the Buddy and Rich show. Or I'll give you top billing so people know you more than they know me. Amui and Gott present.
Hey, I like it. It's got
Yeah,
a good ring.
it's got a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Okay, my friend. Well, thanks again for being on the show. And my
Thank
other friends out there listening and watching, thank you for being a part of the show today. Have a wonderful day no matter what you're doing. Enjoy yourself. Bye.